Over the weekend, the Democratic White House contenders, they made their case to the voters in Iowa, participating in the Iowa Liberty and Justice celebration. The presidential hopefuls explained why they are the best positioned to take on President Trump.
We've got to beat him soundly, so everyone knows we are not going back to a time when another president like him can hold that office. And we must beat him. And I will beat him like a drum if I'm your nominee.
As you all know, I can see Iowa from my porch. And we are going to win big in this state in November.
This is a moment where we need to fight for this country we love, for the rule of law, for our system of justice, and for our very democracy.
So that event began a 3-month sprint to the Iowa caucuses, and while Iowa is certainly key to securing the nomination, roughly 2/3 of Democratic caucus goers have not yet made up their minds. Joining us now to expand on this weekend's event and what impact, if any, it had on voters is Hill correspondent Reid Wilson. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, so this event, what did it tell you about which candidates have the most sort of grassroots energy behind them? It's Joe Biden, isn't it?
It is not Joe Biden. So let me set the scene a little bit.
Yeah.
This event takes place in the Wells Fargo Center. It's basically the minor league basketball hockey arena in downtown Des Moines. They sold more than 12,000 tickets, people who showed up both at tables on the ground and then up in the rafters.
Right.
And those up in the rafters areas, the campaigns will buy big blocks of tickets, and their supporters go with the thunder sticks and bang them together, and the vuvuzelas and all that
light
stuff.
up bracelets or something.
And so the night started off with South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg. His section was full, and somehow the lights on his thunder stick were all going in unison, which was a crazy, like,
That's pretty cool.
It looked pretty cool. They spent a lot of money
You
on
learned that at
technology.
McKinsey.
Yeah.
They teach you that when you go to
Right,
McKinsey.
I'm sure. Elizabeth Warren had a huge section of supporters there. Kamala Harris had a huge section of supporters there. And those are really the three frontrunners who made a lot of noise and showed up a lot. The Joe Biden sections were empty. I mean, they were like, there were entire sections of an arena where they could have done the thing where they pull the tarp over because there's just nobody sitting there.
Oh my gosh.
That was a sign to me that the Biden campaign didn't organize its volunteers, didn't get its people to actually show up. This event is really all about signaling organization 3 months ahead of the caucuses. Right. Can you get your people to the polls? Yeah. Can you get them there and organized and gathered in little groups that they're going to need to pick off delegates? I mean, being in a caucus, like, it's a contact sport. Yeah. It's not like go in, cast your ballot, and walk out. I mean, these things can take 3 or 4 hours of organizing and horse trading. You know, if that's the Joe Biden campaign that's going to show up, there should be some warning signs there.
That is a really great point.
Hey, and by the way, while I was in Iowa, I ran across a guy named Morgan Bethke.
Yes.
Big shout out to him in Indianola.
Yeah. Nice.
A Hill TV viewer.
Nice.
Told me he watches us every day.
We love you, Morgan.
We love you, Morgan.
Thank you.
Reid, I mean, you were down there on the ground. I mean, this is the main thing, is that the Biden campaign manager is already telling the Wall Street Journal, we don't need to win Iowa. Are they just giving up? Is that what it looks like?
You know, every year, one campaign or a few campaigns will say, well, we don't need to win here. We'll start winning here. We'll retrench. Remember, Rudy Giuliani basically gave up on Iowa. Well, before Florida, gave up on Iowa, camped out in New Hampshire, realized he wasn't going to win in New Hampshire, camped out in Florida, realized he wasn't going to win Florida, camped out in California. Right. None of that went well, right?
Yeah.
So the bottom line is, you know, a lot of these candidates are making Iowa their central focus and basically saying openly, if they don't win, they're going to drop out. Kamala Harris, Julian Castro, Cory Booker have all made the big point that Iowa is where they have to start and have to get this big jump. Joe Biden's signaling the opposite, that Iowa is not going to be his sort of prime target here. I remember back in 2008, in a snowy, freezing day, sitting there watching John McCain do his final rally in Des Moines. Actually, it was just north of Des Moines. And then being at another rally and watching the McCain campaign plane take off. Now, that worked for McCain. He ended up winning New Hampshire and basically ran the table after that. Is it going to work for Biden? I'm not entirely certain.
Well, because he's writing off Iowa and New Hampshire essentially
basically,
already.
Like New Hampshire, the second stop, is almost the home state to two of his top rivals, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren.
Right.
So is South Carolina the big win? Is Nevada the big win? Poll came out yesterday showing him up 10 points in Nevada, which is fine. But, you know, is Nevada going to move after somebody else wins these big two states? Look, the bottom line is this race is about momentum. If you can start building momentum, you're going to keep gathering delegates and gaining steam as you head towards Super Tuesday, where a huge chunk of of the delegates are going to be awarded. If you can't start building that momentum in Iowa and New Hampshire, where do you start?
And what did you see in terms of Sanders' energy? I think he took a little bit of a different approach to this event, but I know his team had put out that they had more caucus commits now than they did back in January of 2016. Of course, they're much better organized this time around, but yeah, what did you see there?
Interestingly, I have yet to meet a Sanders supporter who has not told me that they were a Sanders supporter 4 years ago. So who's new? Who is he bringing into the coalition that's new? Now, in a place like Iowa, he doesn't need a lot of new people because he almost won the state 4 years ago. But a lot of his supporters are backing Elizabeth Warren now. Some are backing Pete Buttigieg. You take a look at sort of the second choice among his supporters. A lot of Warren people, a lot of Buttigieg people. Just being on the ground there, it felt like almost everybody I talked to was either enamored of Warren, enamored of Pete Buttigieg. Actually, right outside one of the big political haunts there, a coffee shop called Smoky Row, there's the house next door. The guys who own the restaurant have 2 cars there, and both cars have a bumper sticker for Pete and a bumper sticker for Warren.
Interesting.
And I thought that was the entire race in one
a lot of overlap.
They do have quite a bit of overlap.
Warren
so you wrote this
Buttigieg.
story, second-tier Democrats do or die phase. Tell us a little bit about that. What did you see exactly at this?
Yeah, I mean, this weekend felt like the time when these candidates have to start showing that they're actually building. And can you keep the money rolling in? Can you keep the endorsements rolling in? How do you show the momentum that will build you towards the Iowa caucuses? And it was really underscored right before this big dinner when Beto O'Rourke showed up among his group of fans and said that he was going to drop out of the race.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, a lot of other campaigns noted to me that the O'Rourke people had been out just like everybody else. This is like downtown Des Moines turns into a circus for this thing. There are parades, there are rallies, there are people yelling and screaming and thousands of yard signs all over the place. The Beto O'Rourke people showed up before dawn and were rallying for their candidate, and then their candidate decided at 5 o'clock to drop out.
Oh, that's brutal.
And I will say I was there when he dropped out. I have rarely seen the sorts of open weeping that I did there. I mean, he had passionate supporters.
He had some really committed people.
But he let those really committed people stand out and wave
in the
signs for
cold.
12 hours.
It's not right. You have another piece, Democrats draw battle lines in Iowa Sprint. People are making stronger contrasts.
Yeah, and I think what we saw at the dinner this weekend was the really stark lines drawn a couple of different ways. You've got the establishment lane, call them the moderate centrist lane, Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg, drawing the contrast with the more progressive lane, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, on things like Medicare for all, paying for college, and even the tone and tenor of the debate that they're going to prosecute against President Trump. Elizabeth Warren wants to talk about fighting. She wants to fight and make this case for big structural change, as she likes to say. Pete Buttigieg has made the case, and he's got a new ad out there today saying, the Donald Trump era is not going to last forever. He wants to be the president for the post-Trump era and bring people together. What is the Democratic Party in the mood for? Are they in the mood for somebody who's going to punch their opponents in the mouth, or who's going to bring people together? Answer that question for me, and I'll tell you who the nominee is going to be.
Yeah. So, I mean, tell us a little bit. What are these issues that they want to see people brought together? And what is really animating people on the ground to actually go out and caucus and vote?
Well, there are a lot of I hear healthcare a lot of times. We ask what is your top issue. It's sort of funny. The Iowa voter is a very sophisticated person. If they're going to show up to caucus, they know all the candidates. They've probably met all the candidates multiple times. There's an old line about if they haven't been in my house 3 times, then they're not going to get my support. So the Iowa voter will go through this list. You say, what's your top 3 issues? They'll say healthcare. They'll say foreign policy or whatever they'll say the environment, whatever their top issues happen to be. And then they'll say, actually, I don't really care as long as somebody can beat Donald Trump.
Interesting.
And that seems to be Joe Biden's last remaining best case presentation to voters as to why he ought to be the nominee. He makes the case that he is the most electable candidate.
Yeah, he's been hanging on to that one for a little while. Reid, thank you.
Thank you, Reid. Next on Rising, as the House continues to pursue impeachment, there are questions as to whether the Senate would actually even pursue the matter.
Coming up, my discussion with Congressman John Yarmuth about the process and what he believes Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell thinks about the current president. Very interesting remarks from a man who has known Mitch McConnell for decades. That when Rising rolls on.